Hello you lovely lot, and welcome back to a brand new video here on my channel. If you couldn't guess by the title of the video and my fabulous 80s inspired outfit, today we're going to be talking about Back to the Future, the musical, and I for one cannot wait to get into this as this is a personal favourite show of mine, so I can't believe I've not reviewed it on my channel here already, but let's dive into this. So you might be sat there wondering, Flora, I thought you were supposed to be going to see Bronco Billy, and you would be correct. On the 25th of February, which was a Sunday, I was supposed to be going to the matinee performance of Bronco Billy at the Charing Cross Theatre. However, when I was on the train on my way to London, I received an email saying, unfortunately, the performance of Bronco Billy you were supposed to be seeing was cancelled. So I know what you guys are all thinking, oh no, what's she gonna do? I'm gonna go see Back to the Future the musical. Of course I am. It has a fantastic matinee showing that starts at 3 o'clock, so you're not home super late, which I love. Plus, it usually always has rush tickets available, so me and my friend Cameron were able to book really last minute, really great tickets for really cheap prices. I was sat in row O of the stalls, which usually goes for around £60 to £70, depending on what show you are seeing, and me and Cameron managed to get these tickets for £29.50 each. So, massive savings there, which I absolutely loved, which makes going to see a show like Back to the Future, whose tickets have recently increased slightly out of my price range, even more exciting. So that catches you up to speed on how chaotic my morning was prior to sitting down in my seat and watching this show unfold before me. But in case you are new to Back to the Future the musical, what on earth is this show about? Well, it kind of is what it says on the tin. It's a musical of Back to the Future. But in case you've been living under a rock, or you're just so culturally unaware you haven't seen the masterpiece that is Back to the Future for some reason, let me catch you up to speed. So if you don't know, Back to the Future is the story of Marty McFly, who in the original movie is played by Michael J. Fox, and then Dr. Emmett Brown, who is his kooky crazy scientist friend. And what ends up happening is Marty ends up taking a trip back in time in the time machine, which is this gorgeous DeLorean right here, where he accidentally ruins the story of how his parents met, therefore putting his future in peril, meaning he has to work tirelessly back in the 1950s to get his parents back together to save his future timeline. Naturally, hijinks ensues and it all comes together in a really great feel-good movie, and that translates beautifully to the world of musical theatre. So now that you guys are all caught up to speed on what Back to the Future the musical is about, let's dive into the good, the bad and the ugly. Now I'm going to preface all this by saying this is probably going to be one of my more biased reviews here on this channel. This was my third time seeing Back to the Future, so of course it is a show I like. And I'm also an incredibly huge fan of the movies, but there are still things that I will pick out, critique, and throw into the bad and the ugly category to balance it out a little bit, because I can't spend 20 minutes just gushing about how amazing the show is. Well, I could spend 20 minutes gushing about how amazing this show is, but that wouldn't be a very interesting review for you guys. So don't worry, there are good, bad, and ugly elements to this show, so let's start off with the good. We are going to start our good category by talking about what starts the moment you step through the doors of the Adelphi Theatre, and that is going to be theming, okay? If you have seen any of my videos, whether that be on TikTok or here on YouTube, you know I'm a sucker for a good bit of theming. I like to be drawn into the world of that play or musical the moment I step into the theatre. I want to step through those doors and leave the real world behind, and Back to the Future does this excellently. The entire Adelphi Theatre, even down to the hallways leading to the bathrooms, have been decked out in Back to the Future themed posters, Hill Valley signage, sciencey stuff that you might find in Doc Brown's lab, all sorts of things that really draw you into this fun, colourful world. And I absolutely love it. I love that the doors that lead into the stalls even have an old neon cinema sign saying Back to the Future on it. I really love that. But guys, the theming does not stop there, because they have several themed drinks. Now, as you can see by my gorgeous cup, which I shall demonstrate here, the themed drinks include 3 different flavours of slushie and 1 themed cocktail. Now, upon ordering my slushie, of which I got the plutonium flavour, which was like bright green lemon lime, I didn't realise it came in a souvenir cup. If I had known it came in a souvenir cup, would that have stopped me getting it? No. Am I immensely happy I have the souvenir cup? Absolutely. So they get points for that, even if this is branding, not theming. But I have to talk to you guys about the themed cocktail. It was called the DeLorean Daiquiri. Now, it was rum, caramel, banana, butterfly tea, and lime. And I was reading that going, I'm not going to enjoy it, but I'm going to get it anyway because it's a themed cocktail. But oh my goodness, did this cocktail blow my mind. Not only did those flavors work together, but it changed color. I'm going to throw a video of that in here for you now. How cool was that? I've never had a colour changing cocktail before, and I feel like Back to the Future the musical is the perfect place for it. Another way they theme it, prior to Act 1, the music that is played in and around the theatre is all well-known 80s music, whereas at the interval, bearing in mind we leave Marty at the end of Act 1 stuck in 1955, they're playing 50s radio, which I thought was a really subtle thing that you might not pick up on that really helps sell that the entire audience had been taken back in time with Marty. It's attention to detail as little as this that I absolutely love, and I feel like the show deserves a lot of credit for, but doesn't necessarily always get because it's not strictly part of the show. So this musical gets a 10 out of 10 for the theming. You literally cannot fault it there. Next thing I have to talk about in the good category, of course, is going to be the cast. I feel like this comes into the good category every time I talk about a show. And that is because regardless of what I thought about the substance of a show, the cast is always going to be a standout. But this performance of Back to the Future was particularly special for me because Elliot Evans was on as Marty. Now, if you don't know who Elliot Evans is, he's actually featured in 2 of my vlogs in the past as he was Eugene in Eugenius at the Turbine Theatre. And ever since I saw him in Eugenius, I have absolutely loved him as a performer, and I was so thrilled when he announced that he was going to be alternate Marty in Back to the Future, and so I was absolutely ecstatic when I saw his name on the cast list for our show. He did a fantastic job of portraying Marty. I really loved it. He struck a fine balance between giving us those little characteristics that we know and love from Michael J. Fox's portrayal of the character, whilst also making him uniquely his own. His energy and excitement and joy on stage really fed back across the audience as well. He was such an engaging performer that you couldn't help fall in love with him a little bit, and I would love to go and see him play Marty again in the future, as it was brilliant. But aside from Elliot, the whole cast looked like they were having so much fun. The chemistry on stage was amazing. It was clear to me that this cast really truly liked each other and loved the show they were performing, and that energy is infectious. You can't help but fall in love with a show when the cast performing it clearly love it as well. And so all of that passion and energy that the cast were putting in really did help sell this show and made me realise why I was so in love with the show in the first place, because it is just so much fun and so joyous to watch. Moving on from cast, I would also like to take a moment to talk about the choreography. I think the choreography in this show is fantastic. It's such a pleasure to watch unfold on stage, and being back in row O where me and Cameron were sat, we definitely got the full effect and I loved it. Some highlights are definitely going to be the Future Boy dance, which is a huge big dance number, as well as 21st Century, and what was the other one? And It Works, the DeLorean Girls choreography, I absolutely adore. So I had to just throw that in there. It's not a super dance heavy show, but the moments of choreography that there are fantastic. I also need to give the costumes a little tip of the hat because they are gorgeously accurate to what we see in the movie, which I absolutely love, even down to Marty McFly's purple pants. I feel like this attention to detail really helps sell that you are watching the movie turned into a musical. They've not made too many changes to what people are wearing. And I do think it's quite funny that 80s fashion is very much back in at the moment, so I feel like some of the audience members blended in a little bit as well. I think they also did a really neat job of distinguishing between the 80s fashions and the 50s fashions, making both eras visually distinct so it was clear when you were travelling back and forth in time, which I really enjoyed. Another thing I'm going to put in the good category is actually a few of the changes that the musical makes from the movie. Now, don't worry, they're not drastic changes. They're just little things here and there that help sell the story on stage as opposed to the medium of TV or film. One of those changes is going to be the fact that Marty doesn't get hit by Lorraine's dad's car, so his granddad. George falls out of a tree after spying on Lorraine and hits Marty and then runs off, and that's how Marty ends up outside Lorraine's house. Another change made is to do with how Doc dies at the start of the film. If you've watched the movie, you'll know that Doc dies at the start because he's stolen plutonium. The plutonium Doc uses to power the DeLorean time machine was stolen from a group that were, let's say, politically different to the setting of America, and as such they come charging into the Twin Pines Mall parking lot and shoot him down. We get rid of that storyline in the musical, and instead he dies from plutonium irradiation, which I think is far better and significantly less racist than the movie, so it's a beautiful change, and I think it kind of works. It still serves the same purpose, and it's still something that is equally as avoidable as being shot in a parking lot. So those changes I thought worked brilliantly, and they didn't detract from the overall feeling of authenticness to the movie. In fact, I think they actually made improvements. And finally, I cannot finish the good section without, of course, talking about the special effects. I'm not going to spoil anything, but let me just tell you, when I first went to see Back to the Future, the special effects on display in this show left me in hysterics. Cameron can attest to this. I had tears streaming down my face. My body was shaking. I have never had that same feeling ever again. My mind was blown. Like, I had no other it was fantastic. And this show, what I think is brilliant is the fact that, in my opinion anyway, this show stands on its own without the special effects. So to have the special effects be at the caliber that they are is even more amazing. So if you couldn't tell, I have nothing but praises as a general rule to shout for this show. I think it is a fantastic adaptation of a movie into a musical, because so many of the ones we're getting now just feel a bit half-arsed, and I think this one is gorgeously done. And so huge props to the writing and creative team for bringing this show to life on stage. But Flora's obsession with Back to the Future aside, we still have to cover the bad and the ugly. So let's dive into this. As always, I'm going to caveat talking about the bad and the ugly with the statement that this is by no means a reflection of the creatives or cast involved with this show, and merely a reflection of my own personal tastes when it comes to the theatre. So please don't think I am purposefully going about attacking anyone. That is not my intention. This is just me sharing my honest thoughts on the show. So let's dive into it. The first thing I have written down in my notes under bad is going to be the accents. Now, this is something that gets brought up a lot whenever British people are doing an American show. We saw it a lot with Heathers, in that British actors for some reason seem to really struggle getting a hold of the American accent, and I can to some extent see why. It is, particularly if you're doing a more regional American accent, can be a little bit tricky to pick up. I mean, I have an unfair advantage. I grew up in America, so I can switch pretty easily, but it does also mean that when an accent's not quite landing, I can pick it up quite well as well. And there were just a few moments that were really quite jarring or really British sounding, which was quite amusing. I think as a general rule, it didn't really detract from the show. In fact, you could probably set Back to the Future in the UK. You'd have to tweak a few things with high school here and there, but as a general rule, the story would still work. So the issue with the accents was really minor in the grand scheme of things. And then the only other thing I have in the bad category is less a reflection on the direction chosen by the actors and more just a commentary on the issue with movie musicals in general, and that is, to what extent do you make the character your own, and to what degree do you just make it an impression of the person who originated the role? As I mentioned earlier when absolutely gushing about Elliot's performance, he struck a really beautiful balance between impersonating Michael J. Fox and making the character his own. There was no direct impersonation. He wasn't trying to be Michael J. Fox. He was merely borrowing from that performance to make Marty recognizable enough to people in the audience that he didn't feel jarring, but also felt unique to Elliot and his portrayal, which I really loved. Sarah Goggins, who was playing Lorraine, on the other hand, in Act 1, certainly, it felt very impressionistic. She definitely came into her own and made the character a bit more unique in Act 2, which I really liked. And again, I understand this is maybe less to do with actor choices and more due to how they're being directed to portray the characters. Again, with movie musicals, this is a big issue we run into, in that there is a precedent for how that character should and has been portrayed in the past, and therefore that is to some extent what people expect, so you can become quite trapped. It also leads to an issue with casting, which I found really funny. So Biff, who is the bully character in Back to the Future, is supposed to be this big, large, intimidating man, but George McFly was taller than him. So George has a line going, yeah, well, he's bigger than me. And I'm like, but literally he's not. Like, physically, like, muscle-wise, yeah, but you are taller than him, buddy. So that was a little bit interesting. I just think it's something that is worth talking about, as it is a conversation I don't see discussed necessarily enough as I think it should be around movie musicals. But that is our bad out of the way, which means it's time to move on to the ugly. And I only have 2 items in the ugly. First is going to be the audio. Where me and Cameron were sat, the audio was definitely very female heavy. So when we came to big chorus numbers, it was definitely harder to hear the male vocals. And this isn't necessarily an issue with the show. I do know that the way the sound system is set up in Back to the Future the musical, it's a lot more like a rock concert than your traditional musical, and so I'm aware that the audio is going to sound drastically different based on where you are sat in the theatre. Because me and Cameron were sat on the left, so stage right, we potentially were just sat in a zone that had the female vocals slightly more panned towards us. So it's just a little bit of a nitpick, and I guarantee you it's a problem that could be fixed by changing where we sat. And the only other thing I have in the ugly category is that there were several elements of the set and props that weren't working correctly. The most noticeable one for me is, of course, going to be the blinds on Lorraine's bedroom during the song My Myopia. They just didn't open. You could see people frantically flitting about behind them through the small gap. They were desperately trying to fix them. But alas, George was peeping at someone's curtains, and so I think the song lost a little bit of its effect there. Obviously, me and Cameron had seen the show twice before, so we both knew that this wasn't on purpose. The blinds are supposed to open, and we're supposed to see Lorraine getting changed, and it proves to us that George is a bit of a creeper, and so this didn't happen. Me and Cameron were having a great time giggling at this, but I can understand if it was your first time seeing the show, it would be a little bit confusing. And the only other element that was noticeably broken was the lightsaber during the something about that boy chase sequence. It flashed a few times, which to me, as an owner of several lightsabers, none of which I have here, I am now realizing. I do have lightsabers somewhere. I was going to show you. When they flash like that, that typically means they need charging or the battery's changed. And to me, I feel like that's something that's a relatively easy fix. Again, it's not the end of the world. The scene kind of still went ahead as planned, but does lose a little bit of its effect when some of the props aren't lighting up as they should. But that is the good, the bad, and the ugly out of the way. So I bet you are sat there thinking, Flora, what rating are you going to give this show? If it wasn't obvious already, I'm going to give Back to the Future a 5 out of 5. Is it the most deep and thought-provoking show you will ever see? Absolutely not. But it is a hell of a good time. And if you, like me, are an absolute Back to the Future nerd on top of being a musical theatre nerd, there is no way you're not going to love this show. It is such a good time. You can't leave the theatre feeling miserable after this show. Like, you just can't. And so I think if you have the opportunity to go and see it, bearing in mind because of the special effects and the size of this show, it is one of the more expensive ones on the West End at the moment, I highly recommend you go and check it out. But that is all for my review today. So if you liked what you see and you want some more reviews, check out some of the other videos on my channel and make sure you subscribe so you do not miss another stagey video. I have Peter Pan Goes Wrong and Hamilton coming up for you guys, which I'm sure you are dying to hear my reviews of. So like I said, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that. And as always, my lovelies, remember to stay stagey. See you in the next one. Bye!